Mrs. Suzman, how do you go about your parliamentary work?
Well, of course, during the session, I'm very busy indeed, because my day starts at about 9:30 in the morning, where I go to my office, and I have a vast pile of mail to deal with, some of it fortunately anonymous, so I can throw that away. And thereafter, I have to study bills that are coming up for the day's work, prepare questions for ministers, and generally speaking, get myself ready for debates in the House. The House itself, of course, sits all afternoon and sometimes in the evenings as well. And there I simply have to sit it out in debates and wait for my turn to speak. My preparation for the work, of course, involves a good deal of research work. I'm fortunate in having a very able research secretary who does assist me in getting background material for the speeches I'm going to make. And then I'm very lucky in having a party behind me, which consists of many enlightened people who are experts in their own fields. And I am able to call on these people for their advice and suggestions on different debates. But I'm a very busy person indeed.
Mrs. Suzman, do you see any future for what might be termed progressive forces in South Africa?
Oh yes, I see a great deal of future, otherwise I wouldn't think this job was worth continuing. The future, I think, lies in the fact that the entire economic development of South Africa depends eventually on the adoption of progressive ideals, which is the utilization of labor resources, the opening up of economic and other opportunities to all people of all races in South Africa. And I think despite all governmental efforts to stem this tide, quite inevitably, policy will have to adapt itself to the economics of the situation. Economics are stronger than politics.
What are your plans for the future?
Well, my plans are to continue as I have been, and that is to attempt to put our alternative policy to the electorate of South Africa in the hope that one can get them to understand how important it is to make the necessary concessions from a position of strength, rather than waiting until those concessions might be forced on the country, either by internal trouble or by external forces, although all this, I must admit, is a distant possibility.
Do you experience any form of government hindrance in your work?
Well, so far we've had none whatever, I'm happy to say, and I think the government would be extremely silly if it did attempt to put any hindrance in our way. We are a duly constituted party. We do not believe in any revolutionary methods of bringing about change. Our idea is to convince people of the correctness of our policy and to try and have evolutionary changes according to the circumstances in South Africa. So far, however, we have not suffered any direct inhibitions from the government. We are, like everybody else in South Africa, under certain indirect inhibitions. There is always, of course, the knowledge that in the background there are steps that the government can take which go outside the normal rule of law in democratic countries. These factors act as inhibiting factors.
To go away from that for a moment, does the Scandinavian boycott of South African goods have any effect at all, to your knowledge?
Quite honestly, I think not. I don't think most people even know that there is a Scandinavian boycott of South African goods. And the country, you see, is basically so strong economically that really the standard of living is going up all the time in South Africa, and development is proceeding apace. This is a good field for the investment of capital, and I don't think that South Africans are feeling the effect of the boycott at all.
Mrs. Suzman, the Defence and Aid Fund, to which so many Scandinavians contributed, was this doing any good at all?
Well, as you probably know, Defence and Aid was recently banned by the government,
yes,
and therefore no longer functions. Defence and Aid did good insofar as it provided necessary defence for people who were charged with crimes in South Africa, mostly of a political nature. I must say that something has got to be done to find some alternative to Defence and Aid. The government states that it does provide a certain amount of free legal aid, and that is true. But I think it has also been shown on investigation that not sufficiently broad basis for legal aid is provided to cover all the cases under which people might be brought to court in South Africa. So we've got to look for some other means whereby we can assist people who are going to be charged with certain crimes to obtain the necessary defence. It is my clear view that everybody is entitled to defence in the court of law.
I see. To get on to the Rhodesian question, if the situation there isn't resolved in the very near future, what do you anticipate will happen?
Well, it will really be a great tragedy for Southern Africa. I mean, this crisis which has been precipitated by UDI is something I think which every intelligent person living in Southern Africa views with the greatest alarm. The economic development not only of Rhodesia, but of all the neighbouring territories such as Zambia, Malawi, and South Africa itself will be affected. And clearly nobody likes to go on living in this atmosphere of hostility and suspicion and economic sanctions. And I think that concessions will have to be made, probably on both sides. I think Rhodesia must realise that they're simply not just going to be allowed to adopt this attitude of no compromise on the one hand. And on the other hand, I think Britain is perhaps at fault in that previously she never really reassured the whites of South Africa and of Southern Africa generally, such as Rhodesia, that where the white settled population has certainly got claims to remaining in the country, has helped to develop the country, and generally speaking is responsible for the great strides that Rhodesia has made over the last 60 years or so. And Britain, as I was saying, is at fault in that she has not reassured white settled populations that she does not expect a handover of the country to black rule immediately, this one man, one vote idea, which simply cannot work in countries like South Africa and Rhodesia, where you have people of different levels of development. As a progressive, I am in favour of full participation for competent people in all phases of government, administration, and the economic life of the country generally. But I do not think that one can simply hand over to majority rule per se. In other words, power for power's sake should not be the objective, the ultimate objective. What should be the ultimate objective is the opening up of opportunities to everybody to participate in government of the country in which they live, the opening of all economic opportunities, and the maintenance of the highest possible standard of living for all the people that live in those countries. And I think if some sort of reasonable basis could be reached on the understanding that the advanced progress of Africans has to be maintained and guaranteed from the Rhodesian side, and from the other side that a handover to a black majority per se is not the ultimate objective, then some reasonable compromise could be reached in this very tragic situation.
That's it. Mrs. Suzman, how do you go about your parliamentary work? Do you see any future for what might be termed progressive forces here in South Africa? What are your personal plans for the future? Do you experience any form of government hindrance in your work at all? Do you experience any form of government hindrance in your work at all? Does the Scandinavian boycott on South African goods have any effect at all? Does the Scandinavian boycott on South African goods have any effect at all? Does the Scandinavian boycott on South African goods have any effect at all? The Defence and Aid Fund, to which so many Scandinavians contributed, was this doing any good at all? Let's see. The Defence and Aid Fund, to which so many Scandinavians contributed, was this doing any good at all? To get on to the Rhodesian question, if the situation there is not resolved in the near future, what do you anticipate will happen? To get on to the Rhodesian question, if the situation there is not resolved in the very near future, what do you anticipate will happen? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.